Good afternoon,
check
everyone.
on Facebook or something first before this to make sure.
Yeah, it should be good. I know we're live right now. Good afternoon, everyone, and sorry for the technical difficulties we experienced. We go at 1 o'clock. It's currently 1:32, so we appreciate your patience. But welcome to Smoke and Mirrors presents Malice at the Palace Rewind. For those that have Netflix, you might have found out or realized that the documentary Malice at the Palace Untold was released back on August 10th. And we felt like it was a good time to talk about what took place that day back in November of 2004, November 14th, and discuss some of the implications, especially because the documentary got into so much of it, and we have so many opinions now being more than 10 years removed from that, going on 20 actually, looking at it really. So before we get into it, I want to introduce our illustrious panel. All right, we have Greg, obviously Greg Polius, the one and only. But with us, we have Coach Womack, who you know and love. Coach, how you doing?
Thanks for clicks, baby. We in here.
We got Matt Williams, a Detroit Pistons fan, and also the host of the original Jeek podcast. And if you give the people an understanding of what Jeek means, because I didn't know, I would like for them to know what Jeek means and Jeek Nation.
Absolutely. So I am an old school Pistons fan, bad boys for life. And a Jeek is the combination of what I am. I was a big time jock, football, basketball, baseball, soccer star, and track and field star. There was also a massive geek who was watching anime back in the 80s and reading comic books and watching Star Trek and quoting Shakespeare. So I took jock, I took geek, and made them one thing.
Honestly, I appreciate you for that, because I didn't know I was a geek. Like I all the nerd stuff. The podcast I had, Black Nerd on the Low, was made because as a jock, people didn't see me as a geek. You know, exactly. You don't get the visibility.
Come out into the open, my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace it.
Bro, you know, beautiful. And we also have Mike Miller, the guy. How you doing, sir?
Great, man. This is going to be a great conversation.
Mike Miller, Reggie Miller, super fan.
Yep, super fan. And as I should say, Mike Miller is our Pacer fan. So we do have a Detroit Pistons fan. We got a Pacer fan. Got Coach Womack, who is our NBA insider, the guy that just knows it all. And you got Greg and I hosting this, making sure that and it's gonna stay on the rails, but there's a lot to cover on in this. And I just want to start with Coach. I'll start with you. After watching the documentary, back in 2004, you were in high school, correct? Mm-hmm. So, did you watch the game live? You remember watching it?
I didn't watch the game live, but
okay.
I literally, as soon as it happened, they cut whatever I was watching. ESPN. I remember the channel was 36 back in the day, living in the
Yep, that's a fact. Cable was 36.
Yeah.
I watched the game live because I'm probably the oldest one here.
Gotcha. All right. Well, no, and we're gonna get to that, but with Coach, so you did get to see, the aftermath, also how the media covered it, and I want to get the comparison to being a high schooler, a teenager, hearing about that, understanding what the ESPN was saying, other media outlets were saying, and comparing that to what you saw in the documentary, what you've learned. I think there's a quite a difference in what we potentially thought and what was actually taking place behind the scenes, and what we really weren't told when this all broke out. So what was that difference for you after watching the documentary?
I mean, for sure. I mean, let's take it back to 2004. Al Gore's internet was thriving, but we couldn't find our own sources. We didn't know how to look for our own sources at that point. We didn't have Twitter. We didn't have, the players or the people who were involved being able to give their actual accounts.
There are no platforms for them.
No platforms. We just had the narrative that was being painted. And at that time, all I saw was athletes going wild. They really didn't get into who did what. We didn't get all those angles that we see now of the drink going out. Like, all we saw was Ron Artest, the fight, Ben Wallace. We knew it was going to be heated. Ron Artest laying down, and then he runs into the crowd and tries to take a guy's head off. That's pretty much what we got. And the narrative painted was just, here we go with these athletes again. They were trying to clean up the image of the NBA. The Allen Iverson stuff was going on around that time, a little bit around that time as well. So it was just like, here's another example of why we got to clean this nonsense up. So at that time, I pretty much was on the side of the media and what they were giving us, because that's all I had. I was just like, yeah, these guys are crazy. Like, you can't just run into a crowd like that. Like, you know, and I was a Knicks fan, so I really didn't care if the Pacers lost their whole entire team. They could have suspended the Pacers for the 2004, 2005 season. I would have been totally fine with it at that time.
I feel that. Yeah, and that makes sense, though, because you're right. There weren't as many platforms out there. Players couldn't get their voices out. We weren't, even Reddit, like Twitter and Reddit are huge. Those are two sources that anyone can go to, and conversations or existing forums are there for them, where in 2004, that really wasn't the case. Matt, I want to ask you now, someone that saw it live as a Pistons fan, as this is going down, what were your thoughts then? Also being the elder statesman in this on this panel right now, what were your thoughts then? And then seeing this documentary, has that changed at all?
So, I was still, a young man. So, in 2005, I was, 20. I was like 24. No. I was like 26. Yeah, no. Hold on. 05. How old was I in 05? No, I turned 18 in 2000. So 23. It's 23 years old. All right. So I was 23 years old, but I'm married by this time. I've got kids. I'm a little older than my years say. And here's the unique thing for me. Because my kids are from Pennsylvania, where I live now. They did not grow up in the Pistons environment. So I'm trying to train these children to become Piston fans. We win the championship the year before. So they're kind of ignoring all these Sixers fans because a couple years ago, the Sixers failed against some same Lakers and we trashed them. So I'm getting some traction here, getting my kids to be Piston fans. And I'm watching this game. And I had to watch this game because it was a statement game. Pistons Pacers in that 04 ECF was fantastic. So I'm watching this game, and from jump ball, I knew the Pacers were the better squad. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, my Pistons are done for this year. But I'm a fan. I still watch, and I say, oh my God, what's going on? I see the hard foul because I've seen those wars. You saw them back in the 80s, those extra hits, the revenge hits. And I see Ron Artest take the hit. I see him lay down. And the camera actually didn't really go far from Ron when the cup hit. And then pandemonium ensues. And I was just like, I was one of the few people who didn't go with the media, to be perfectly honest. Because I've been in those areas where, different situation where there was a race thing where people were throwing stuff at us. But I've been in that situation where the crowd is against you and they're hurling stuff at you. So I automatically empathize with Ron, even though I wouldn't have gone into the crowd. I understood why he did it. And I empathized the most with J.O. And I was mad he got suspended because he never even left the court. The only people he hit were idiots who got on the court. And to me, when a fan comes on the court, they are fair game.
Yeah.
Players stay on their side and fans stay on their side. Once a player crosses, or the fan crosses that line of demarcation, I don't care if they get snuffed or not. They deserve it. Charlie Haddad, I don't know why they even bothered having that fool there because he should have been locked up.
Yeah.
And
complete clown.
Yeah, and the fool that threw the beer, who started a small riot in the Palace, and get this, understand this. A lot of people don't understand this. The Palace of Auburn Hills was not in Detroit. It was in Auburn Hills, which is like 3 hours outside of Detroit. It's in the freaking white bread suburbs. Okay, most of these fans here, drunk white folk, acting a fool in the suburbs, and a drunk white dude decided to start a riot because he wanted to throw something at Ron Artest for no good reason. I was on players from day one. I'm still on player side to this day.
That's definitely a different take from what you see in the documentary from Pistons fans.
Honestly, I became a Pacer fan that night. Like I respected the Pacers. First of all, those uniforms were hard. When they dropped the news a couple years ago, I was like, oh, and I'm a Michigan fan.
Don't lie because Mike is here.
No, I'm a Michigan fan. Maize and blue were my colors, man. And so when they dropped them pinstripe, blue and yellow that looked like the University of Michigan. I was like, oh, I need to get me one of these. Like, this is nice. So I was feeling them for that. I respected Reggie for years. And I liked J.O. I loved how hard Ron Artest was because he reminded me of a bad boy Piston. Steven Jackson, same thing. Jamal Tinsley, I love Tins. People forget about how good Tins was. I respected that squad. And then when I saw them stand up for Ron, even though Ron, we all know Ron is off. His teammates, friends, like, look, Ron is off.
Yeah.
But they stood for him. They wrote for him. And the most important thing, and people didn't realize until subsequent years recently where the outlets where they talk about it, they were just trying to keep Ron safe. They weren't trying to just like, hey, let's get the chance to swing off for some Punk fans. They're trying to keep their teammate, their friend, their brother safe because they have a job to do, and they were the best team in the league. And they proved it that night.
Yes.
And unfortunately, they lost the championship that night.
I appreciated Steven Jackson, honestly, in that documentary and how he spoke to it because he was there for his brother. Like, he was there for his teammate. And I thought that was amazing. Like, anyone would want someone like that in their corner. You know, and I can see how, as a Pistons fan, you can leave that game, you know, from your perspective and admire the Pacers. I wasn't sure you'd become a Pacers fan, but admire the Pacers.
I low-key, like, I couldn't hate them anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, look, I can't hate these dudes. These dudes were real. And their beef wasn't with my Pistons. Their beef was with unruly fans who I would have beef with regardless of what team they were rocking.
Yeah, I feel that. Mike, and before we go on, actually, I just want to make the correction. I apologize. I said 2004. It is 2005, as you had said, Matt, when the Malice at the Palace took place. But, Mike, I want to know your perspective as a Pacer fan now, watching that game live, and again, seeing the documentary, were your takeaways the same? Did you kind of vilify your Pacers and believe what the media narrative was? Or were you taking it as like, nah, that this is something that the media messed up on?
Well, I remember watching it. I was in Atlanta at the time. I think I just graduated high school. So I remember watching it. And the first thing I thought was what Matt just said, my season's over. Like, cause I knew they were gonna get suspended. I knew immediately when I watched it and everybody was hitting me. Like, it was almost like a couple of years ago when Paul George got hurt and broke his leg. Everybody called me like, yo, you all right? So like, everybody was hitting me like, yo, you good? Cause like I knew in that moment, I said, okay, the season's over. But honestly, how I felt in the moment, I hated Ben Wallace. Like, I hated him even more for that because I blamed it all on him. But you got to remember, the year before, when we were in the Eastern Conference Finals, J.O. bumped knees with him, and he wasn't healthy to finish that year because I believe we were the better team and we would have beat the Pistons. So he bumped knees with Ben Wallace. So when Ben Wallace pushed Ron Artest at the time, after everything happened, my only thoughts were, I hate Ben Wallace because I actually liked him, but I hated him even more. And I was like, you stole a championship from me because you was mad because we was spanking you. So I never faulted. In terms of Steven Jackson from that moment on became one of my favorite players ever. He could never do nothing wrong in my eyes.
Yeah.
Because to be his first year there and to ride for the Pacers like that,
hard.
And what was so riveting for me in the documentary was what they all felt the same thing I felt as a longtime Reggie Miller fan. They said it wasn't just because we were the better team. This was Reggie Miller's chance to be a champion. Yeah. One of the greatest NBA players. Everybody knows this. Everyone respects him. And we robbed him because he retired that year.
Yeah.
So we robbed him of his last chance to get a championship. And Steven Jackson said in the documentary, that's the main thing I regret, that Reggie didn't get a championship because we were built to win. We were the best in the NBA at that time. And as Matt just said, even as a Piston fan, everybody knew it that night. Everyone knew, okay, this is the team to beat in the NBA. And so me being a Pacer fan, it was hurtful in that moment because it was like, oh, man, it's over. But the documentary didn't change anything for me in terms of how I felt about the players. I never felt like the players were wrong because once the guy threw the cup, at this point, you violated. So if Ron is going in there, I'm from New York City. We from New York. We know how the hood works. If you violate him, then all bets are off. Like, Of course, they would have wanted to do it differently. And as everyone knew then, people didn't know then, but what they learned now was what Ron was doing was what he was learning in therapy. He learned that you count your 3 seconds and then you lay down. That was unorthodox because he's laying on an announcer's table, but that's what he learned in therapy to calm down. So you violating that man in a vulnerable state where he's trying to woosah and you're violating him. So at that point, anything goes. As far as Captain Jack, what is he supposed to do? His man is in the stands, and Steven Jackson a few years ago, a while ago, when he was on Dan Levitar's show, he talked about it, and he talked about the incident. And one of the things he talked about was, in that moment, it reminded him of his older brother who got killed, and he wasn't there for his older brother. So he said he had flashbacks of that in that situation. That's why he said he never changed it, because he vowed from that day forward that if his brothers is there, extremely loyal, I'm always going to support my brothers. So for me, Steven Jackson, that's a real one. And same thing with J.O. The fans walked on the court. I hated all of it from the start to the end of the whole thugs and all that. I always hated that. And this documentary, I'm glad that they were able, and I think Mac mentioned it earlier, they were able to finally tell their story. The media narrative couldn't stay by itself. Now we see how people are treating fans nowadays in stadiums. Everybody has a key awareness. That's what I think changed a lot, is that people are recognizing, hey, just because you bought a ticket doesn't mean you get to be disrespectful. These are not monkeys in a cage you don't get to be disrespectful to them. And so, but the documentary is phenomenal, though. It's well put together, and I'm glad that they got to share their story finally.
Let me just say, I was a little disappointed in the doc because of the point you just made there, Mike, is that I personally was offended with how, especially during the game. Again, I'm watching the game live, and Bill Walton is calling them thugs and just being super racist. And describing what happened. Now, remember, I came up in the 80s, okay? I remember when Kevin McHale went up in the stands and decided to knock somebody out. No one was calling Kevin McHale a thug back then. You know, I remember when Mad Max went in the stands and decided to slap somebody, okay? Now, in 2005, yes, it was more in the internet age, but it wasn't in this social media age where it would have been on TMZ and World Star, the Shade Room and everything. Like,
by no means.
If it wasn't for ESPN, no one would have really known what went down during this regular season game except for Pacer fans and Piston fans. So it wasn't in this hyper reaching age of internet. Nobody. And I was disappointed that the documentary didn't address the fact that they were so detrimental in defaming the character of those Pacer players. Because you look back in history, there have been much bigger thug moments in NBA history outside of what happened in the Palace. The only thing different about what happened in the Palace was that it extended for such a long duration. It went on a lot longer than past iterations had. That was the main thing. It started up, it died down, started up again, and then died down. And then when they tried to get them off the court, it started up again when they started showering things on them as they went through the tunnel.
Yeah, all the drinks, popcorn, all of everything.
Yeah, when they show chairs and everything. That's what I'm saying.
All bets are off.
All those angles that we got to see, you really got to really see the whole story.
The gravity of what was going on in that stadium.
But that's what makes this documentary worse to me, more damning to the NBA. Is
we're gonna get into that, Mac.
We are just seeing all the angles, but they saw it in
everything.
2004. In 2000, and it was 2004, Steph. You were right. 2004.
Okay.
All the NBA.
So that means Call was wrong.
It was
he was wrong.
It's the 04-05 season. So when we talk about seasons, we say 05.
Yeah.
But it was still 04.
It's still 04. Got you. That's okay.
November of 2004 is when the incident happened. But as I was saying, the NBA and David Stern, all the angles that we say we didn't see, that's why we couldn't. Some people didn't make a rush to judgment, didn't know what's going on. They saw every single angle. And after that, they still decided to do what they did. And the reason why, I know Greg's going to get to it.
Yeah.
This was not just, it was a repulsive action by David Stern. Because if you look at the timing, if you take what happened, November, what was it? What was the actual date? The 5th?
I think it was like 14th. The 19th.
Well, it was mid-November.
Yeah, mid-November.
I think it was around early the first week of November because David Stern's, his press conference was the 21st. I remember that. His press conference was November 21st when he announced the suspensions. And that, you know what that tells me? Rush to judgment. Out of all those things happening, all those hundreds of people that need to be interviewed, all those hundreds of cops, all those different angles, if you only take a week to review all the evidence and come up with these suspension, it tells me you had an agenda pre-planned.
2 days, coach.
Yeah.
2 days. 19th is when it happened.
It was 19th.
I remember that date.
So
It's seared in my memory. So he decided after 2 days.
All the video, and in 2 days, he came up with his suspension. And like the political science researcher in me goes back and researches everything. I went and read his entire interview. Every question that was asked him. And I'm going to say this one thing that stood out to me, and then I'll pass the mic. When they asked him, what could the NBA do in terms of security reasons to do a better job? He said, I have not looked into security yet. So basically what he was saying was, I haven't even dealt with what we could have done. This or the arenas, because the arenas fall under the
understaffed
umbrella. He was just worried about the NBA's perception. And at that time, if you remember, he was trying to
change the dress code.
But not only that, they were competing to try and pass baseball. This is when they were trying to pass baseball as the number 2 sport in America. And he wanted to start that global outreach and really make the NBA a global conglomerate in terms of sporting events. And he knew he couldn't lose the fans, and he knew he couldn't lose the sponsors. So this is all money and greed, and this has nothing to do with actual, with lack of a better word, actual what the conduct was or actual morals. If I may say, morals didn't play a part in his decision.
Mac, I need you to get out of my head.
Well, you study political science too, so that's why we're saying. That's why.
So I do want to say, Mike Miller, this is the only thing in history that could make me feel any type of compassion for Reggie Miller.
I understand what he's done to you. I understand, Nick fan. I understand.
Well, former Nick fan.
Yeah,
former Nick fan. You were Memphis. You were Memphis now.
At the time, you were a Nick fan, though.
Yeah, at the time, I was a Nick fan.
And you're supposed to feel that way about Reggie. You're supposed to. You remember this. You remember that. You're supposed to feel that. It's only right. You're supposed to feel that.
So that being said, in terms of what I looked at it when I was in 04, I was just graduating high school. I took it at face value. I was like, damn, players wild out. They got to be held accountable, but I still thought the fines were excessive and the suspensions were excessive. And I think one thing that we don't talk about in the Black community enough is you don't necessarily find your Blackness as a child because the world doesn't allow you to see it. So when you get to a certain age and your eyes start opening up, you start seeing things in different light, especially when you get into college and you start learning how the world operates. As
you start to experience it, because really your Blackness is viewed through the spectrum of whiteness. That's how you view your Blackness as a child.
100%. And then looking back on a documentary now, especially studying on, like Max said, poli-sci history and, how media coverage and all of that, I think the biggest issue I had with is at the top, it starts with David Stern, because it could have stopped with David Stern, but it didn't. He was the one who put the battery in the media's back. And on top of that, the cops in that documentary were full of shit.
Man, were they?
Oh my goodness. You telling me you don't know who Reggie Miller is?
Energy.
And you were gonna mace Ron Artest?
Come on, son.
It was pathetic, honestly. And the energy they had in that documentary to me matched with that night. Like, they gave not two craps about any of those players, right? And it shows. And I'm sorry to cut you off. It was frustrating because that was one of the more frustrating points, hearing those two officers speak about that night so nonchalantly. You know,
Yo, Steph, I'm surprised you were frustrated because I wasn't on that part. That's one part that I actually was like, yeah, this seems about right.
But that's what frustrated me because it's the norm.
Yeah.
Well,
I never want to be jaded enough that I don't get frustrated by that. That's how it is for me. It always is going to impact me.
When the one cop who said it first, he didn't know who Reggie Miller was.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, because but on the real, look, I'm a black dude from Detroit. I don't know White Stars. There's a ton of White Stars. I have no idea. Like I'm in this 80s group on Facebook, and they posted some picture of some girl took in the 80s, and she's wearing the same thing now. And they're like, "Oh, she looks great." I'm like, I don't know who this white woman is. They're like, "You don't know Debbie Gibson?" I'm like, I ain't never heard of no Debbie Gibson. I don't know who. She could walk down the street and be like, "You don't know me?" I'm like, "Nah." So that to me wasn't off. What was off was when they and he clicked after me. He's like, I don't know who Reggie Miller is. And I'm like, okay. And then I thought about it. I'm like, no, you know who Reggie Miller is because 5 minutes ago you said that you guys, do security for 20% of
the
Pistons do. That's what I was going to get to.
So if it is not like we're talking about a player on the Clippers that you see twice a year. We're talking about a Central Division rival. You know who Reggie Miller is.
We played 4 times.
Exactly.
After what Reggie did in the 90s, there's no way.
We owned Reggie back then, though.
But
you
know who Reggie Miller is. It's a division rival.
Even a casual fan.
And hold on,
Reggie Miller.
And not even that. This is what bothers me, stuff. Because this is the ignorance of people who are put in these positions to protect. You have to read a room and read a situation. That's what your job is as an officer. To take the temperature, look around, and see what needs to be addressed and how to address it. Yes, it was pandemonium. But if I see someone with a suit on, hugging and holding the player, and that player is
no aggression.
He's not pushing Reggie Miller off of him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm looking and seeing Reggie's not, he's carrying a player out. I'm looking and I can know that situation, this must be somebody with the team or somebody who's being accepted by one of these players. This is not an incident that's actually going higher. I need to look around and see what else is happening around me. This is not something I need to address. And he's talking about we was about to mace.
I mean, if you look at his stance, he had a stance of fear.
Yeah.
But agreed. Oh, yeah. And Greg, I want to let you continue because I know you're making your point. All I want to say, response to what you said, Coach, is he did read the room, and his reaction is exactly what he would do every time. Because as a white man, he saw the pandemonium that was taking place, and he was targeting a black person. Right? That, to me, is what it comes down. At the end of the day, it comes down to he saw what the threats were, and he was assessing the threat and having to take care of that threat. And that's why he's like, okay. Even if in that moment, seeing a player and seeing a person in a suit that is not showing any form of aggression, Reggie Miller was not at all trying to push nobody, angry face. He was kind of like wide-eyed, like, oh, I can't believe this is going on, but trying to take care of Ron. And here you have the police officer coming in and wanting to mace him. And again, I think that it went the way it would every time because this is very often these police officers, just about all the time, these white police officers
it speaks to
come
the
into situations
that the
exactly
stadium was in.
It does. And you look at the threats, and your people that look like you are typically the threats. Because there's no fans he could have went after. With all the pandemonium going on the court, it's a court. There should not be fans there. How are you going after the guy that's up next to the player, which the player is clearly comfortable with? So, Coach, you are right about that.
And also, let's not forget the fact that Reggie Miller is 6'7". Okay, even if he's in a suit, you see a 6'7" brother, and don't think that he might be a player, even if you don't recognize him.
Yeah,
he's 6'7".
100% a fact.
A legit 6'7" too.
He's on a fake. He's on a WWE 6'7". Reggie is a real 6'7".
We adding 2 inches.
It's not no Allen Iverson. I'm really 5'9", but they gonna call me 6'1".
So Matt, you know what I thought about? Not to switch gears, but to switch gears a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of not poetic, but ironic that this incident happened with the team that essentially was one of the forefathers of tough play.
Yeah.
So if you had to put five,
Wow.
if you had to put 3 arenas, right, or 3 teams, if I had to, like, before this happened, if you asked me 2003, 2004, pick 3 teams or three franchises that if you thought an all-out brawl can ensue, who would be your choice? And for me, at that time,
Detroit. It was always going to be one of them.
Detroit?
Yeah.
Detroit and Pacers.
No, Mike.
Or even the Bulls.
I would have picked Detroit, and at that time, I would have had Knicks and the Heat.
Yeah, Knicks definitely.
We had brawls, but we had some brawls, like real, like, everybody throwing punches.
Because those '90s Knicks tried to be a remix of the Bad Boys.
Listen, we were one superstar away from being Detroit. Like, you guys had Isaiah Thomas, and you had Joe Dumars, and you had a Robin. We didn't have a number 2 to equal up anywhere close to what Joe Dumars was.
Well, Mac, aren't you mad that the Knicks didn't get Zeke after when they was hoping he would come back after the Achilles? Because that trade was supposed to go down.
It was supposed to go down, and I think if we would have got Zeke, there's another if, but it would have given us a better opportunity to be successful, because what we lacked on offense, we had in terms of defense and toughness.
Bro, if you have Zeke instead of Derek Harper, y'all win the championship that year. Don't you know it?
Listen, man.
Hold on, Greg. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm gonna Greg to continue his point because we did cut him off.
Oh,
as far as you're talking about media, no, it's all right. Right
before we get into the media, just Carl had a point. He believes we have to confirm it. He thinks that during blowouts they move security to the parking lot, and he thinks that's what happened that night. But even then, if that is the case, in an NBA stadium, I don't think that's necessary to only have 2 cops on the ground. That doesn't sound right.
Why didn't security? Why didn't the call? If you see the call and we just saw interviews with actual cops, why didn't they say we moved our security? Why didn't David Stern say that in his interview? When they asked him about security, why didn't he say, well, usually in blowouts, most arenas send their security to the parking lot? I think that's what they do now. They may have security, but back then, I'm going to tell you, the NBA, listen, let's be honest now. The NBA did everything to not get sued. And have to have the arena
100%.
You have to place blame on someone or some team.
Need a scapegoat.
Placed on the players, because if the blame was placed on the NBA and its lack of controlled environment, which is what we see all the time now, the NBA would have probably had bigger issues. Players would have sued them. Fans would have sued them. See, now, if you blame it on Artest, then that means a fan is going to sue Artest. They're going to sue
what happened? They was trying to sue them.
Yeah, they were trying to sue the players. If the NBA would have said we didn't provide an environment that can safely protect our players and our fans from an incident, which is under the responsibility of the arena, if you look at the law, the NBA would have been sued. So this whole entire propaganda was decided on in a back room to say, how are we not going to be liable?
There you go.
Yeah,
that's a business aspect of it. That's a fact.
Yeah, and just before I get back into the media, I just want to say the fans that lack so much accountability took this as a joke and just gives you an idea of what they think of the players. Because even to this day, what's that guy that Charlie Haddad? To have the audacity to go on the court with a clenched fist and think that it was Ron Artest's fault that he got punched in the face is crazy.
First of all, you have to be crazy to go onto the court and square up with Ron Artest.
Ron Artest, a basketball player, but Ron Artest in particular, though.
Yo, he had the nerve to say J.O. did a sucker move, and it was a sucker move.
Right?
Are you crazy?
Just because you got knocked back 10 feet, don't call it no sucker move.
Even his energy after, like when he was interviewed.
That guy's name? Charlie, whatever.
Charlie Haddad.
If you got his Instagram, if you got his Twitter, if you got his address, put it in the comments, man. Because I'm gonna send Manny Oliva over there.
Give him the monos,
bro. That man is really losing his mind.
But and here's the crazy thing about the fans.
He's still banned. He can't go to Piston games. Like he
shouldn't.
He should never be allowed to go to another Piston game.
And as bad as he was, I had a bigger issue with the fan who threw the drink because he took it as a joke after the fact.
In the interviews, he was laughing about it. It was comical to him.
And here's where the media comes in. and David Stern. And David Stern, I dropped this squarely at his feet, just like you do, Mac, because they allowed the media to parade the fans around there as victim. And I don't know if let's have a real conversation.
Wait, sorry to cut you off. Can you just change one word because words matter? Don't say the NBA allowed the media. The NBA gave the media because they work together.
You're right. You're right. Good catch. But let's have a real conversation here. And when the media paints their narratives, right? They like to paint black people as we have a victim mentality. And this doesn't matter whether it's Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, they all do it. They're all guilty of it, whether or not they realize it. But I frankly think they know what they're doing. And it was ironic to see them pushing these fans out there as victims instead of showing all the angles, what really happened.
The aggressors.
And then the one word you heard in every interview was thug. Every interview. And this goes back to, way back. And people don't like to hear this, but it goes back to trying to paint the black man as violent, as the aggressor.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they did without having the fans take any accountability. So now let me ask you guys, as fans, how did you react in that moment to constantly hearing these players being called thugs and aggressors, and that they were the reason that the NBA image was suffering?
They also called it a hip hop sport. It's a hip hop generation of players.
Generation.
They like seeing that in the documentary, tying that in, like hip hop had to do with why these players were the way they were, or the way they reacted the way they did. It was racist rhetoric all around.
Yeah, I love when you say that, because the biggest debate I have with people was, and this is actually a Jay-Z line. I tell people I'm a big Jay-Z fan. Ray Jarvis, if you listen to this, you probably be proud. You can hold it better than me, because I know you're a Jay-Z fan too. But Jay-Z says a line where he says, Scarface the movie did more than Scarface the rapper to me. That's the realest line that I use when I talk about people trying to bring down hip-hop.
Yeah.
Scarface showed me how to sell kilos. It showed me how to kill my enemies. It showed me how to build up an entire drug empire that set so many families back. They didn't even show the uses of drugs. All those movies can be shown. Every Mafia, every Godfather movie, every Untouchables, every Goodfellas, all those movies showing constant people killing each other can be shown. But hip hop is the reason why communities are the way
Got
they
devastated.
Yeah.
Black communities.
Rap songs are the reason, but these movies that are perpetrating, serial killers and mob conglomerates,
Kingpins,
are not the reason. And we all know what it's for. So to go to your point, Greg, they tied it in because it made it a story. How do you see his you know how it works. How do we keep this a topic for the next 6 months so we could get as many eyes on our show? We're gonna make it more than just an incident. This is not, because it really was an isolated incident. This had never happened before or after. So it's an isolated incident.
Yeah.
But somehow they made this culture.
Yes.
The culture of the NBA, because now it creates a narrative. Now we can keep talking for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, make another Netflix documentary in 10 years.
17 years.
We continue to make money off of it. So media is media 101. Carl Coulon says it all the time. Media, when you're a media man, you're a media man.
That's right.
You
That's
mentioned victim mentality, Greg. There's only one victim when it comes to the fans, and that's who almost looks like the kid in the black shirt right behind Coach that we see in his background, the one that Artest hit, because he did absolutely nothing.
Nothing. Yeah,
he is the only victim of the fans.
Just happened to be next to the
he just happened to be next to the idiot who threw the beer, and he's the only one who
John
got
Green
paid
is his name,
because he did nothing wrong, and he deserved to get paid because he got clocked for no reason. Everyone else
He probably did something in a previous life. He probably did
you know what he did? He was saying the N-word on the rap songs on the way to the house.
No. He could have been his current life. You don't gotta be previous life. He could have been. He was. We don't know his background.
I'm joking.
But he didn't have it coming. But him, and also we need to also put some blame on the feet of Jamal Tinsley, because that's something new that I did not know.
I'm
doing it. I'm doing it to Tinsley. I love Tinsley.
Let him hold on.
I'm doing it to Tinsley because he did not need to tell him to go get his foul.
Yes, he did. The same way a baseball catcher tells the pitcher to pitch high and inside when they going against someone that they have a problem with. The same team NFL guy.
Just because they do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
That's the rules of the game. That's the rules of the game.
It's the unwritten rules of the game. I know the unwritten rules of the game.
How dare you? Out of all, wait, talk about. Out of all, hold on, Matt. Out of all fans who gonna say he should have had told him to do that, you had Bill and Bear and them telling people to kill MJ. Like, literally, if he dies, he dies.
That was y'all thing.
He dies, he dies. Jamal Tinsley was doing, listen, put it like this. When you
we did that. I'm not taking it because I did it and embraced it. But when the Bad Boys did something like that, it wasn't after we were blowing somebody out and then we were like, okay, go get a cheap foul.
Wait. Hold on. I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is it okay to tell somebody they have to stop playing hard because of the score?
Nah, he's not saying
that. No, I'm not saying playing hard. No, because he's saying to go get his foul, which meant just go get your piece of flesh. Go hit him.
Exactly what he did.
I'm not saying don't play hard, because I played hard in every minute of the game.
But that's the psychological part of the game. Like, this game this wasn't just this game.
It was a culmination of things, especially for the finals last year.
So if Jamal Tinsley was saying get your foul back, he was trying to say, yo, let them know.
Here's my thing though. No, I hear that, Coach, and I don't disagree with you necessarily. However, Ron Artest is the wrong player to tell that to. That man is a powder keg.
It don't matter, bro. No. That's the thing. What? It's like Steven Jackson said. Nobody knew that Ben Wallace's brother had died. Nobody knew that. So they didn't.
But see, hold on, Mike.
Nobody knew that.
Jeff, we doing what the media is trained us to do. Just listen for this. Listen to this.
All right, say it.
Jamal Tinsley told Ron Artest to foul him. Right? Ron Artest fouls him. Ben Wallace takes aim to the foul and starts pushing and shoving Ron Artest.
He threw a punch, didn't he?
No, he didn't throw a punch.
He didn't throw a punch, just pushing, just like a push. It was one shove, a hard shove, and then got separated. It was a real hard shove.
And he gets them. The refs come break it up. People come to the half court. They separate the players. Ron Artest goes and lays on the scores counter. The whole thing ends right there. If it wasn't for the fan to throw something. So the rules of the game work. This is the game we play. We know.
I'm not blaming the riot part on Tinsley. I'm just saying what Tinsley sparked something on the court.
Basketball. That's basketball.
Basketball, Matt. Because
that's basketball. This is what we do. No, he telling him. Jamal Tinsley was saying. Mac is absolutely right. Because I told you, as a Pacer fan, I hated the Pistons at that point. So Jamal Tinsley telling him, yo, bro, okay, we blowing them out. Notice they're still in the game. We was up by 30.
Yeah.
They're still in the game because Jamal Tinsley's telling them, yo, bro, we sending a message. Like, no, we own them now. So, no, that's basketball. He like, no, we sending a message. Get your foul back. It is.
Coach, you're right. No,
why did you tell him that? Like, but
you're right. You're right, Coach. I did allow the media to play a part in how I was thinking about this because Ron Artest does sit down. It's not like he gets angry and goes back and forth. He gets shoved and he allows his boys, his team to take care of it for him. So you are right because in that moment, especially the rivalry they had up to that point, to get a foul, right, is big. You're up big and you send a message, and that is sports. You know, there are intangibles like that have an impact in a series on a team, and that's what they did. So I do agree with you.
Like you said, that's the psychological part of the game.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm pretty sure. I hate using ifs, but I'm pretty sure.
It's okay. You want smoke and mirrors? You can use ifs. You're not on the Wednesday show, bro.
On test. If that wouldn't have happened, I'm 100% sure in coaching, he was coming out of the game after that foul. That was the message. Usually that's what happens. You get the foul, you get called off, and you go to the bench.
And it's that.
Game was over.
After that fight, if nothing, see, this is what people understand. If nothing is thrown from the fan, the NBA players, like Steven Jackson said, we're brothers. I fought some of my teammates in practice. I fought players in pickup, but we know what we're doing, and it never really, leaves the gym or turns into something else because we understand we're $1 million. They're $1 million players.
No, nobody really wants to smoke.
Yeah, nobody wants to smoke.
I mean, I think Jo said it in a doc. He said NBA fights usually don't ever happen.
No, Steven Jackson said it, but most NBA fights don't really happen, especially post 90s. That really, really didn't happen. But the reason why I didn't like that with Tins is just because they had the lead, and to me, even though I played Piston style ball when I played, to me the bigger message, I wouldn't try to get my foul back at that point. I would have rather dunked on you. I'd have rather put another bucket on you to send that message, and I'll get my foul back in a more of a clutch time moment in between in a serious game where I'm sending the message physically. I personally wouldn't have taken that.
That foul don't count, Matt. That foul don't. You don't get that foul. Ain't gonna go to your foul numbers.
No, that's right. The game is already over. We up 30.
No, see, to me, when the game is over and I'm blowing you out and I give you that hard foul that puts you on your butt, that doesn't carry the same weight to me as if you're down 1 and you're trying to score and I block your shot and I put you on your butt. To me, that sends a bigger message.
Now I go shoot 2 free throws and take the lead. What are you talking about?
But see, this goes back to my point.
Most of my competition wasn't on your level, Mac.
No, I'm saying like if you foul somebody, I get what you're saying, Matt. Listen, I get what you're saying. Like what you're saying is basketball wise, which is if it was a score,
right.
If it was a score or dunk, I would agree with you 100%, Matt. Like I would say, like you don't need to showboat a 3-point shot when you're up by 30. That does nothing for me.
Yeah.
But foul to me, because those teams were built off of grit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the
you had a grit and grind.
Also,
points we gonna score. It was who's tougher.
When Ron Artest was on the court, he played hard every single minute he was on the court. So you cannot expect anything less of him. And even if Tins didn't even tell him to do that. If he was in the paint, I think he would have went up the same way and tried to contest the shot.
Same thing. He probably would have did it anyway.
I don't think he would have done it anyway. I don't think he would have.
From the way,
it's just the way
Jack says it. It doesn't look like it would have happened if Tinsley doesn't say it.
The documentary makes it seem otherwise, that it was not going to happen. He got the green light.
Selective editing.
Even before the doc, Jack has said that though. Before the doc, Jack has said it as Tinsley sparked it.
Put it this way: even if it wasn't that foul, it would have been a different kind of foul in a different game. The tension was there.
Oh yeah, the tension.
Both of our teams were on the toughness. There was going to be something between these teams. Were they going to go into the stands? No, that was the fans' fault. But they were going to have something because everybody knew what the situation was between these two teams. It's going to be physical. We're going to grind it out, and it is what it is. That game was like 76-55. Like all of these scores, that's what it was about. So it's like, that's how I had to go, man. And media. Ooh, I want to talk about that media point.
Yeah.
If we're still on that.
I wanted to get back on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue, Mike.
So media, and Greg, you diving deep, and I like to, let's go there. So when we talk about the perception of Black men in particular, and you think about G.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, filmed in the White House, of the menacing, raping Black men. And so throughout society, we keep seeing that, particularly with Black Americans, you keep seeing this perception. And so everyone, even Caribbeans or everybody that's brown and a male, there's a perception that's already tagged. And so when you look at the NBA and how their response is, it's not only that it's black men fighting, but then you have the white people they're fighting against, with not the two Spanish gentlemen notwithstanding. So when you have the imagery, it writes the narrative for itself, where you can paint it as here's these menacing black thugs versus these innocent white people, and that's when we talk about that white fragility and different things like that. So it all plays into this very convenient and comfortable narrative. And what one of the realities it showed is that your celebrity doesn't hide you from that reality. So while we assume that some people assume that our athletes have a certain status, that they're absolved from all of the aspects of a racist system that is currently existing in America. So we think at times that they're going to be absolved from that. But moments like the Malice in the Palace, or the dress code, or don't show your tattoos, or you act a certain way, all of those are moments that give us a window into exactly how America views people that look like us. This is why there's more work to be done.
Dehumanizing black bodies, whether they are your superstars or they're regular civilians. Yes.
Absolutely. So, and that's where it shines a light and makes it the responsibility of a lot of all of us, really. But, you know, those who want to take on that responsibility, being in media, is to have that counterweight. It can't always just be the athletes that have to speak for themselves. There should be other media members that give that counterbalance to say, well, wait a minute, because there were no other voices at that time. That's what the documentary showed. No. It was just one narrative, and all of the media pushed that narrative. Whereas even Stephen A. Smith.
That's a product of the time.
You took the words right out of my, and this is one of the biggest issues I had with Stephen A. Smith, as Kwame Brown, Kwame Brown Bus Life would like to say, the go along to get along gang.
That's right. That's right.
And Stephen A. Smith fell right in lockstep with the narrative. And like I said, sometimes it takes a while for us as black men or black people in general to find our blackness within life. So looking back on it, it's even more upsetting to know that he was a grown black man playing into this what is probably one of the most volatile stereotypes in the history of known to man.
That's right.
Honestly, Greg, to be honest with you, I don't think it's a product of Stephen A. playing into it because he didn't know any better. More so, Stephen A. was trying to get his bag, and he cannot be the pundit, the anchor on ESPN that is going against the narrative. ESPN knew from rip when this happened how they were going to approach this particular scenario. And as a black man, if he went to bat for those players, we wouldn't see Stephen A. wouldn't be who he is today. He would not be on ESPN. He could have easily been blackballed. And we weren't in an environment where players could speak for themselves at that point. So, and Matt, you brought that up before. And actually, you and Coach brought that up. There was no space for players. Like you had J.O. who wanted to speak out. And he was eloquent in that documentary. I loved any time he was speaking. And I feel like if he had an opportunity, if that happened now and the media attacked him the same way, he would be able to dismantle a lot of what, civilians would have thought of what took place, because words matter, right? And if you have a certain eloquence to you, you can disarm people. And I think he would have been able to change how people felt about what took place there. That's one part of it. But I do believe that Stephen A. I do not like Stephen A. Not one bit. But I understand a black man trying to make for himself, because at that point in 2004, 2005, Stephen A. doesn't have the big contract. He's a contributor.
2004, Stephen A. is barely an ESPN contributor.
Yeah.
He was still full-time with the Philly Inquirer.
Yeah.
Exactly.
During that,
trying to get his bag.
And to play devil's advocate, Stephen A.'s, because I remember the piece he did on CNBC, well, not the piece, but the interview that they had talking about it. In my observation of it, he tried to be very neutral in the words he said when he was talking about it.
Struggling with his blackness.
Because
I could see that.
I think inside his heart of hearts, he knew he was on the side of players, but he could not demonstrate that on television, especially on CNBC. He had to be and granted, as a media member, especially as a journalist, you're supposed to be objective. So to
Yes.
me, that's just doing your job. You don't show any partiality.
I mean, they were partial though. All of
Well,
them.
but most of the
all
media,
of them-
unfortunately, was partial. But just speaking on Stephen A. Smith,
Yeah.
you know, he
It's relative.
he was trying to be very objective to what happened and said, look, we can't, you know, and that part that they put in the doc when he's saying these things can't happen. I mean, that's the true thing. These things can't happen. Unfortunately, the way it was tied in, it was more made to look like he's saying the players can't have these things happen instead of just
and that was the
these
problem I
things
had
can
with it.
happen.
Hold on, but I will say this: Kenny Smith is in that documentary too for a hot second, and
Mhm.
he focuses on the fact that that fan needs to be held accountable, the one that threw
Yes.
the cup, and that is more than what Stephen A. was saying, right? Like, because Kenny.
But here's the thing: Kenny Smith is on a basketball show on
Yes.
TNT talking
Kenny
about
Smith
it. He's not on CNBC.
Yeah,
but that's
with a
even
different
more-
audience.
But he's still a black man, and like my thing is whether he's on a big network or a smaller network, he could take a hit because if you go against the narrative as a member of the media, you could end up hurting yourself, your career, right? Like you can have someone that does no longer wants to associate themselves with you because you are not on the same page. And when I saw that part for Kenny Smith, I was like, man, thank you, right? Because the players,
Steph, you got to remember, just like what we're doing right now, this is a production. What we saw with Stephen A. and we saw with Kenny was a production. Kenny is paid to be the player's advocate on inside the NBA, where Stephen A. was paid to be, objective for CNBC.
But the context is different. The context is Kenny Smith is a former player.
Yes,
so
that to me.
He's going to speak as a former player. He's not a beat writer. That's the same reason why Charles Barkley, since he's been in media, has said, I think we should be able to punch fans.
Yes.
He's saying that.
We're talking about a dude who's pat on fans.
He's saying that as a former player. So Kenny Smith, when he sees it, he automatically jumps back into when he was playing.
Yes.
When I was playing, what would my response be? What would I want? The first thing he's thinking is, I want protection for myself and my team. Stephen A's thinking, well, I'm just a beat writer. I'm like you're saying, Matt, I'm kind of neutral. But now what we're saying is we're talking about courage and integrity as a black person. Now that's your profession. And not everybody has that. Some people are willing to toe the line in order to receive the bag. And some of us, Kaepernick, are willing to take a loss for the betterment of others. And at that moment, as everyone's saying, Stephen A. was only one of the few. It's only Stuart Scott, Michael Wilbon, and Stephen A. at that time, really. It's not a bunch of black faces.
Yes.
So there's a lot of pressure, because now you talk about your personal finance, there's a lot of pressure to toe that line. But again,
and he wouldn't, and Stephen A. wasn't even on that Michael Wilbon, Stuart Scott level at that time either.
No, right. He's a small.
He's trying to establish himself.
Yeah, he's a very small fish at that point.
Right. So, but again, that courage and integrity is difficult, and it has to be in those moments where we see often for us as black men. There's moments where it's a sacrifice, and it's difficult to do that at times. So.
However, just granted, at that time, the general consensus was that even though he didn't say anything in the positive,
that's right.
He was getting love because he didn't say anything negative. Like he wouldn't say anything against either. Sure. And we're just in a time right now where, consciously as black people, we're going beyond the the silent affirmation where it's like, okay, well, we can't be silent anymore. Like we've done these passive positive things, and now we need to take a more of a verbal stand instead of be like, well, we won't say anything negative. Now we need to make sure that we're saying something positive.
I agree. And I think just to the Stephen A. point, and Mike, you bring up a great point of that crossroads in a black man's life where he has to pick. And going on CNBC was a prime opportunity to kind of say, hey, and I understand he wasn't well established yet, but I think he tried to toe the fence so much so that it didn't exactly come out as he was saying what actually was right or wrong. He's just basically saying it can't happen. He was trying to absolve himself of the discussion. But if you're going to do that, why go on?
That's right.
Well, that's how I look at it.
I know what you're saying. Is this they brought him on because honestly, remember at that time, he's the top sports writer in Philly.
He's a black face.
He's the one that made AI partially made AI a cultural phenomenon because of the way he hyped talent in Philly. So CNBC probably reached out to him and was like, look, this guy, he's someone who can speak to this, this hip hop NBA generation because of who he has helped made so popular. Let's bring him on and see what he says. And they probably wanted Stephen A to say something negative, and he was like, look, I'm towing the line here. I'm not talking bad about the players, and I'm going to say this is something that cannot happen, with players and fans, and call it a day.
What it exposes is the dangers of the perception of neutral. People are not really neutral. People take stances all the time. People are on sides. And it's one of these. People have heard it often, and people. It's one of the things that people say, like, "Oh, God is on one side, the devil's on the other side, and you're a person standing on the fence." And God says make a choice, and you say, "No, I'm not choosing either one of you. I'm gonna stand on the fence." And then the devil comes and takes the fence, and you go with him because he said, "Well, you're on the fence, and the devil owns it, so you go with him." So it's one of these. It's one of these ways where you look at it as actually straddling the fence means you've picked a side.
Yeah.
Dr. King often talked about the it's not the racist with the hood, it's the quiet
it's the moderate who does nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the neutral is not neutral. And what you're saying and what we're all recognizing is in this time and age, we're all identifying you pretending to be neutral when you actually are taking a side. And now we're saying, no, this is the line. I'm standing on this side. Are you willing to stand on this side? Because anything opposite this side is against you. Neutral is against me. Perceived neutral is against me. Going on the opposite
Not an
side
ally.
is against me. So this is the line. And in that moment with Stephen A, again, everybody is going against these black people, the black men. The overwhelming narrative is these are thugs. These are all. The narrative is plain. You at that point there's the line. You at that point have to stand firmly behind your people, but that's courage and integrity. And sometimes there's moments, Michael Jordan, Republicans buy sneakers too. There are all where we are going to have to make
zero integrity.
We're going to have to make that tough decision of, hey, and that's not just for celebrities. That's us in our everyday walks in life. The microaggressions that we experience, we can be quiet and say, well, if she just said you're smart for a black guy, she hasn't encountered a lot of black guys before.
Or you talk white. I've heard that for years.
Aren't we all sick of? Aren't we all sick of you're so well spoken?
Yep, you're so
I am sick and tired of hearing the first thing they say positive about black
so many
person.
white people.
He's so well spoken. Oh, he's so well spoken.
At the moment where at some point we're saying now as a collective, we're saying, hey, I'm no longer going to just bypass your microaggressions. We're going to address those. What do you mean by I'm well spoken? Why did you expect otherwise? I'm educated. And now we challenge it. So in that moment, Stephen A, and I would love for somebody to ask him, how do you feel looking back? Same way we're asking the question, we're reflecting in retrospect. I would love someone to ask him. So if you had an opportunity back then, knowing what you know now about the whole story, would you take those comments back? Would you have been more?
Womack, set it up. Get Stephen A. Smith on Smoking Mirrors.
Right? Because I think Stephen A. would probably take a more bold stance if knowing what he knows now.
Maybe there's a chance. I mean, I don't necessarily believe in Stephen A. like that, but I will say that as far as the documentary goes, I do wish they brought on more of the pundits, more of the media people on that doc. It could have been a lot better. The documentary was really good. It was well shot. You know, I think the way that
angles.
The clips they got,
you mentioned
the gravity to it.
You mentioned the media members, like they had Jim Gray on there, but they wouldn't. The Jim Gray didn't really say anything.
Yeah,
he was he was alluding to like, well, you know why?
Exactly.
But no, Jim, say it.
That was literally his
Jim.
best moment.
If it's because they're black, just say it, Jim.
Yeah, it built to nothing. But I think they needed to have more media members. I would have liked to have more fans that were there, right? Fans that, because for the fan that didn't end up getting any kind of slap on the wrist or whatever, the ones that were throwing drinks, popcorn, the aggression, I wanted to see some more of them.
I would have loved to hear the 911 caller.
Yeah, like all of that. Like I wanted to see more of that. But Mike, you're talking about not having a neutral, but to me it creates a third party, right? Because you have two parties, and that third party is I don't have a side. But because you're not with me, then you are against me. Yeah, I get that. As long as you're not with me, you are against me. So I do understand that as far as trying to tote the middle, thinking that you're okay. We're just I don't have a side, so I can't offend anyone. But by doing that, you are defaulting yourself against both, and that is the third party aspect of it. However, in this scenario, and typically in the scenario, there's one side that will take it differently, the side that's being attacked. So if you're not helping me and I'm under attack, then you're not necessarily attacking me, but you aren't for me, and I don't view you as someone that is, helpful or could potentially help me at all. You are a problem.
Yeah, it's like the bystander. It's like the bystander effect.
Yeah.
The bystander effect. We're being beat up. You're standing on a bystander. You're watching. I'm neutral. I don't got nothing to do with it. But somebody's hurting me. Why don't you do something about it? Somebody's actually. Yeah. So you if you're not helping, then you're hurting me because you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Why don't you help me?
And what's wild, Steph, is that what happened in the Palace was so complex that, and what the media did was they made it a very, and not racially just black and white, but they made it a very for fans or against fans. When you actually look at the situation, like I said earlier, that kid in the black polo, he did nothing wrong. You can be for him, and that's okay. You can also be for Ron Artest because no one should have thrown a beer in his face, and that's okay. You can be for Jermaine O'Neal punching Haddad, who had no business being on the court, and that's okay. You can be for Ron punching Haddad himself because Haddad came on the court, and that's okay. Like there are different levels. It's not just, oh, I support the fans, or oh, I support the players. It's a more complex situation than that. But they painted it to be a one versus the other completely narrative, and partially because they wanted to, because the NBA wanted to keep obviously fans. They know where their money comes from, Coach said. And they have to make the fans, feel happy so that they continue to, to buy jerseys and buy tickets.
So I know we've been talking about this for a while. I do want to transition a little bit because this is a part of the documentary that I did really like, and that was the growth of Ron Artest, right? Meta World Peace. And I remember the time when he changed his name, and even in the documentary, they have clips of the media killing him. This is so stupid. It's dumb. Like they said it on air.
So embarrassing. It made me so angry hearing that.
And seeing the buildup, right? Him acknowledging who he was as a person, right? And the faults he had, seeking therapy while he was with the Pacers. Even in that moment where he could have blown up after that foul, and he didn't. And he took that moment to listen to what his therapist said and to take the 5 seconds. That person to me, and mental health in the Black community, another thing that isn't spoken about enough, Ron Artest, now Meta World Peace, was like a pillar in that. Like he knew what he needed to do, and he took the steps. And the media did not, necessarily take the approach of Ron Artest or Meta World Peace is doing, like the good work, the work he needs to do, and complimenting him. It was more so he's a joke, he's a laughingstock. And what I found to be very powerful was when he won that chip with the Lakers, and they asked him, and he says it, I was a coward. He owned up to it. Now, I don't know what that means to J.O., to Reggie Miller. They didn't really speak to that, which I wish they did a little bit more.
They spoke to a little bit.
No. They spoke to how they felt, but not hearing what what Meta World Peace said in that interview. Because now you watching him on TV, and he just want to ring, And so I thought that moment was very big to him for on national television to say, I was a coward. I walked away from those guys, and I should not have done that. And I thought that was a big moment. And I wanted to commend Meta World Peace because he fit the narrative, right? The stereotype, angry Black man, that he's the aggressor. He's the punk, he's the thug. But truly, that documentary showed me more about who he is now and who even was then as he was changing. And that was a big piece of it to me that I was so happy. I mean, it kind of warmed my heart to see that, because that's a development. I don't know his past, right? His history, how he grew up, but I can only imagine it wasn't easy. and the player that he was, and a lot of some of these other players that go into the league that have trauma, and we just expect them to be perfect. You can't mistreat human beings, even if you don't have trauma. If you get mistreated the way that some of these players get mistreated, you wouldn't expect them to respond to it as, oh, it's okay. I get paid millions of dollars. I'm not going to do anything. No, you will wild out because they are attacking you. And I was just, I want to know your thoughts on it, but I just felt like Meta World Peace, from where he was as a Pacer, where he is now, that growth, even in the next few years after Malice at the Palace, was huge. And it's something that I think should have been highlighted a little bit more than as a footnote.
Agreed.
I'll say real quick, Steph. Ron Artest's life story, especially how it ties into his mental health, really highlights a lot of the importance of people like Coach who coach basketball, who coach especially young people, because
young Black children.
Yes, especially because there are been, the Ron Artest of the world, the Allen Iversons of the world, and other people who have had public, incidents and such that people look upon negatively, and they say, "Oh, well, they were okay here. Why were they not okay at this point?" And when you become a professional athlete and you're a grown man, it's very rare that you have a mentor that is able to stick with you and be a guiding force and help you to a certain extent. Allen Iverson really didn't have problems at Georgetown. Why? Because Coach Thompson was a very stabilizing part of his life. Artest did not have something like that in Indiana with Rick Carlisle. Jermaine O'Neal didn't have that with Rick Carlisle. In my personal opinion, and not just because I'm a big fan of his, but I think the Pacers would have been better off had they kept Zeke as their head coach, because I don't think that I think they would have had a stronger support and mentor in him than Rick Carr was able to give as a Black man and as a professional, especially in situations like this, where he just said, "Okay, this is how we do, this is how we react as a team when we have a situation like this, and to control ourselves, control our feelings, and conduct ourselves as professionals and as Black men in society." That's something that Zeke had done in the 80s and 90s. It's something he would have been able to teach to them that Rick Carlisle just would not have been able to teach to them. And so not having that presence, those types of presence, makes a difference in how it just is stabilizing in life, and so that's a small thing that people kind of overlook, in that like when Ron is at St. John's, I can see his face in my head, but I forget the former coach of St. John's name. But Ron was not this trouble guy, at St. John's, but he had a very stabilizing situation when he was playing for the Red Storm.
Yeah, I think that guidance is huge.
With St. John's, it was also a lot of who were the assistants. You get what I'm saying? Like, they had some of those people who were community coaches, Riverside coaches, who have been around him,
his whole life.
Those relationships, who kind of kept him at bay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, but you make great points, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. You went a little deeper to the mental, mental instability that a lot of people may have that people don't think about.
Because it shocks the system. Like, you're 20 something years old, you're 19, 20 years old. You go from stability, and like a lot of people that didn't play ball at a high level don't understand how many your high school coaches and such, or assistants, follow you often to college programs when you're a top player. How much that stability, like, people don't realize, that Jalen Rose's coach became an assistant under Steve Fisher, and how often things like that happen, and those stability points stay with you from 8th grade to college. But once you get to the NBA, a lot of those things don't happen anymore, and it's a complete culture shock. It's a complete shift in mindset, and then who's actually for you and who's just there to profit off of you now. And a lot of guys can't deal with that because either they weren't taught to, or their support system that they have outside of that isn't able to continue to support them because they're supporting other young people that as they supported that person, and now they're unfortunately floundering out on their own.
And the coach Matt was Fran Fraschilla. And big shout out to Fran's niece, Maria Fraschilla. She went to St. Francis with us. She's a St. Francis grad, Mike. So big shout out to Maria. She was always proud of her uncle, Fran Fraschilla, who does a lot of commentating. I think now he does a lot of analysis, if I'm not mistaken. He's in that game now.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, I appreciate this conversation, gentlemen. This has really been refreshing. I think after watching the documentary, I wanted to talk about it. I'm glad that we put this together. Thank y'all for coming on. I mean, and for the fans, everyone that's watching, I hope you enjoyed this, because to me, this is the kind of robust conversation I want to have around material like this, revisiting something like Malice in the Palace, because that's just one instance. And there's more of that as far as the, narratives, media narratives, especially around Black men, Black bodies. Mm. So yeah, this is a moment, for us as Smoke and Mirrors, as a organization with, with Sports Hit List, like this moments like this to me are very special, to be able to get together and have these discussions that are very necessary and exist outside of sports. Yes, we're covering sports, but in these cases like this is much bigger than sports as well. So, Matt, Coach, Mike, really appreciate y'all for coming on. I just want to let the fans know, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to all Sports Hit List content. We're on.
Can I say one thing for people?
Yeah, sure.
Because I had to go away. I had to step off for work for a second.
Yeah.
But I say this. When it comes to a lot of sports and narratives, don't take our word for it. Do your research. Click on ESPN highlights, hockey fights, MLB fights. Listen to the narrative and how the announcers joke around when someone in those arenas, which is not a fighting sport. See, I didn't say hockey. I'll give you hockey. So take away hockey. Just look at baseball fights. Look at bench clearing baseball fights in baseball. Take away hockey. Look at bench clearing baseball fights in baseball where people leave the mound, they leave the
bullpen, leave the dugout,
leave the dugout, and they start fighting. Listen to the language and listen to how it's presented and how it's covered. Then watch a football fight, even with helmets in the NFL, or watch a basketball fight and see how the announcers talk about the players and talk about the level of the situation. And then compare and contrast, and then have a conversation with yourself as to the why. And once you do that,
and your peers,
got it. Yeah, and your peers, for sure, your peers.
Yeah. And Matt, and on that note, Matt, Mike, do y'all have anything y'all want to close on and give y'all the floor?
Matt closed it out beautifully, man. Continue to support the Mirrors, continue to support the Sports Hit List.
Yeah, Sports Hit List, and the original Geek podcast.
Yeah, big shout out to our fearless leader, Carl Coulon.
Boss man.
Yeah,
can't forget him.
That media bum.
That's okay. In the comments, he said he was mad that he wasn't on this one.
But Steph, big shout out to you and Greg too, and you guys got another partner where I can't think of his name right now.
Declan.
Like you guys, like not a lot of people have created shows and content and haven't really kept up with it. You guys have been doing a good job of keeping things fresh.
I appreciate that.
Bringing good topics, and it's always good to grow the brand. And you guys, I think, are stepping into your own lane. So, congrats. Keep it up what you guys are doing, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, man. It means a lot, especially having y'all on, because y'all help us, having contributors, having, the wealth of knowledge that you have and bringing it on the show, because our fans love it. Every time we have guests like y'all on, numbers go up. So thank you to y'all, for making time to come on the show,
sure.
And share your knowledge. And like I said, Matt, I just wanted to shout out Original Geek podcast, because I'm in that game and I know what it's like. I'm gonna check it out as well. So make sure y'all check that out.
Appreciate the love. Thank you.
Of course.
Appreciate being invited.
Yes. So yeah, like I was saying, make sure you like, share, subscribe. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The handle on Instagram is SportsHL. Again, that's SportsHL. Coming up on Monday, you have us again. You got Smoke and Mirrors 1 to 2. And then again on Tuesday, we're gonna have the fan zone with Mike and Manny. So y'all can look forward to that. In the meantime, hope you enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, be well, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Take care.
One love.